probably heard the term mob justice, right? It's usually painted as a messy, chaotic spectacle, a bunch of people taking the law into their own hands. But what if I told you there's a deeper story behind it?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. Popular justice, as it's called, isn't just about random acts of anger. It has a complex history tied to power dynamics and even the way governments control us.
That's wild. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Our source material is a discussion between Michel Foucault, the philosopher, and a group of Maoists back in 1971. They were talking about a recent attempt to set up a people's court in France to deal with police brutality. It gets really interesting.
You bet it does. Foucault starts by saying we shouldn't just assume a people's court is automatically a good thing.
Wait, hold up. So you're saying even if the people are the ones running the court, it's not necessarily better than the official system?
Right. He actually suggests that historically, courts have often been used to control popular justice, to keep it under the thumb of the government.
Huh. That's not what I was expecting. So what's an example of this?
Foucault tells a story about Parisian workers back in 1792, during the French Revolution. They were furious at the aristocracy, but when they were offered a chance to take their grievances to court, they refused.
Why? Why would they turn down a chance to get justice?
They saw the courts as a tool of the very people they were fighting against. They wanted direct action, not legal proceedings. They didn't trust the system.
Wow, this is turning the whole idea of justice on its head, isn't it? It makes you wonder, what if we're completely wrong about how courts are supposed to work? What if they're designed to channel the people's anger in a way that benefits those in power?
That's a very important question. And Foucault goes even further, looking at the September massacres during the Paris Commune. These were really intense events of violence where people targeted those they considered enemies of the revolution. He argues that even though they seem spontaneous, they often involved a third party.
A third party, like some hidden puppeteer pulling the strings.
Not necessarily hidden, but definitely influential. It could be a group, an institution, someone who steps in to mediate between the masses and their perceived oppressors. They appear neutral, but often serve the interests of a specific group or power structure. They become the arbiters of what's right and wrong, basically deciding what justice looks like for everyone else.
So they're like gatekeepers of acceptable outrage. They decide what kind of anger is okay to express and what isn't.
Exactly. And that ties into Foucault's bigger point about how judicial power has changed over time. He argues that courts started out as a system for arbitration and private power, but then they shifted to be directly tied to wealth and the feudal levy.
Wait, the feudal levy, that sounds like something straight out of a history book.
It is, but it's key to understanding how we got to where we are today. This shift Foucault talks about is what gave rise to the classical judicial system we're familiar with, the one with this ever-increasing concentration of power and resources. Courts became less about resolving disputes and more about enforcing the interests of the wealthy and powerful.
So it's not just about justice anymore, it's about control.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. Foucault observes that in modern France, popular justice often operates outside the court system. Riots, uprisings, direct action, these become the expressions of popular justice.
Because people don't trust the courts to deliver real justice.
Precisely. Foucault argues that the state apparatus has become so entrenched, so anti-popular, that true expressions of popular justice have to flee from it.
That's a pretty bleak outlook, but I can see how it connects to what we're seeing today with so much distrust of institutions.
Absolutely. And to illustrate this point even further, let's talk about the Dreyfus Affair.
The Dreyfus Affair, a classic example of injustice, right? This was a huge scandal in France in the late 1800s, where a Jewish army officer was wrongly accused of treason.
Right. And while it appeared to be a victory for justice when Dreyfus was eventually exonerated, Foucault argues that the affair ultimately reinforced the power of the state and its institutions.
So even when it seems like the people are winning, the system is still in control.
Exactly. Now, the Maoists in this discussion bring up a counterpoint. They argue that the Chinese Revolution offered a different model of justice, with the People's Army acting as a guide and protector of the masses, facilitating a truer form of popular justice.
So a revolutionary army working for the people.
That's the idea,
Yeah.
but it raises an important question. Can a state apparatus, even a revolutionary one, truly embody the will of the people?
That's a huge question, and one that gets to the heart of this whole deep dive. The source material focuses on very specific historical examples, but these dynamics are still playing out today, right? Think about all the recent movements calling for justice, often outside of established institutions.
It's a constant tension between official justice and popular justice, and there are no easy answers.
Exactly. And that brings us to the core question that this discussion leaves us with. Is there an ideal form of popular justice? Can it ever truly exist within a state apparatus? What do you think?
That's a profound question, and one that resonates deeply with contemporary events. The tension between official and popular justice is constantly evolving, particularly in our digitally connected world.
Right. It's like we have this front row seat to these struggles as they play out in real time. It makes you wonder, what can we learn from these historical examples to navigate the complexities of justice in our own time?
Well, one thing that comes up is the importance of organization. The Maoists argue that true popular justice can only be achieved through collective action, guided by a revolutionary vanguard like the People's Army.
So it's not just about spontaneous uprisings, it's about building a movement with clear goals and strategies.
Exactly. But Foucault pushes back on this, questioning whether any state apparatus, even a revolutionary one, can truly represent the will of the people.
He's like, power corrupts, even when it's wearing a red star.
Right. He sees this inherent tension between the need for structure and the potential for that structure to become oppressive.
It's a classic dilemma and one that's still very much relevant today. How do you balance the need for order with the desire for freedom and autonomy?
Foucault seems to suggest that there's no easy answer, that it's a constant negotiation, a push and pull between different forces.
It's like walking a tightrope, trying to find that delicate balance between control and chaos. But what does this all mean for us, the listeners? Why should we care about these abstract ideas about power and justice?
Because these ideas are playing out all around us, shaping our lives in profound ways. Think about the criminal justice system, the police, the courts. Think about social movements, protests, calls for reform. All of these are grappling with the same fundamental questions about how to achieve justice in a world where power is unevenly distributed.
So it's not just about history, it's about understanding the forces that are shaping our present and our future.
Exactly. By understanding how these dynamics have played out in the past, we can better equip ourselves to navigate the challenges of the present and to work towards a more just future.
It's like having this historical lens that allows you to see the world in a new way, to recognize patterns and connections that you might have missed before. But it's not just about seeing, it's about doing right. What can we do with this knowledge?
That's the crucial question, and one that each listener will have to answer for themselves based on their own circumstances and beliefs.
Yeah.
But I think the first step is awareness, is recognizing these power dynamics and how they operate.
It's like that first step in any 12-step program, admitting you have a problem. You can't fix something if you don't even know it's broken.
Precisely. Once you start to see the world through this lens, you start to notice things you might have missed before. You start to question assumptions, to challenge narratives, to demand more from the institutions that claim to represent justice.
So it's about becoming more informed, more engaged, more empowered to act.
Exactly. And it's not about finding some perfect solution, because there likely isn't one. It's about engaging in this ongoing struggle for a more just world, recognizing that it's a process, not a destination.
It's a journey, not a sprint. But hey, at least we have Foucault and the Maoists to guide us along the way. Speaking of guidance, where does this discussion leave us? What's the final takeaway, the parting shot, the thing we should all be pondering as we go about our day?
The discussion ends on a thought-provoking note without a clear resolution. They leave us wrestling with that fundamental question. Can there ever be a perfect system of justice, one that truly serves the people and not those in power?
It's like they're saying, don't expect a neat and tidy answer. Keep grappling with this. It matters.
Exactly. And what makes it even more relevant is that they were having this conversation in 1971, a time of massive social upheaval around the world.
Right. Think about the civil rights movement, anti-war protests, feminist activism. All these movements were challenging the status quo and demanding a more just society.
And what's striking is that so many of those movements were operating outside of traditional legal channels. They were engaging in direct action, civil disobedience, creating their own forms of justice because they felt that the existing system was failing them.
So it's like this idea of popular justice isn't just some theoretical concept. It's been a driving force throughout history, pushing for social change and holding the powerful accountable.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Look around at the world today. Look at the movements for social justice, for environmental justice, for economic justice.
All these calls for a fairer, more equitable world.
Exactly. Ask yourself, where do you see these tensions between official justice and popular justice playing out?
How are people challenging the system, demanding to be heard, creating their own visions of a just society? It's like this deep dive isn't just about understanding history, it's about understanding ourselves and the world we live in.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that the struggle for justice is ongoing, that it requires constant vigilance and a willingness to question the systems of power that shape our lives.
So, yeah, maybe there's no easy answer, no perfect system, but the very act of questioning, of demanding more, of pushing for change, that's where the real power of popular justice lies. Keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing for a better world.